Joel Klatt joins us each week courtesy of our friends at MyBookie.ag. Code next round to get that deposit when you sign up to a $200 deposit on a bonus on an initial deposit of $500 or more. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag. Code next round. What's up, Klatt? How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys? What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Just talking a little NFL today, actually. But
there you go.
Yeah, college football is the big deal. When you look at Ohio State, Jaxon Smith Njigba makes it official. He's going to the NFL and all those things. Do you feel like he is one of those players? I was thinking about this today. One of those players that you look back on, he'll go probably have a great NFL career, and you're like, man, we just did not get enough of him in college. He's going to be one of those players that people are like, I just don't really remember him that much at Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, Utah fans will remember him. They certainly will remember that Rose Bowl. Yeah, I mean, I think this will go down as one of those kind of forgotten seasons, and in particular for a team that it's like, man, what would they have been with him all year? I think coming into the season, he was the best wide receiver in college football. And, they had another one emerge that turned out to be the best wide receiver in college football, Marvin Harrison Jr. And you just wonder to yourself, like, what would that offense have been with Jaxon Smith Njigba? And also if TreVeyon Henderson stays healthy. But that's part of football, and sometimes you get injured, and he just could never get right. I think that history will look back on him and remember that Rose Bowl, but I think that it's going to be an interesting case study for the NFL. I really believe that this guy is probably not top 10. He's probably in the middle to back half of the first round, and it really depends on how he runs, because now there's going to be all sorts of question about his top-end speed. That was the question before the season anyways, as it relates to the NFL. But now with this hamstring, they're going to be really evaluating that 40. So, from his standpoint, even though it's not the strength of his game, that is going to be one of the most important 40s that I can remember in combine history when he gets to Indianapolis and runs, or if he waits till the pro day, whenever he runs, that's going to be like a vital piece of his whole stock for the NFL.
Hey, when we brought you in, we were talking about Tom Brady. So let's combine the NFL and college football and Brock Purdy, the guy that we saw, a 4-year starter in Ames and Iowa State.
Yeah.
And that sophomore year was his best year. And then he just kind of leveled out and he never got better. And I never saw Brock Purdy. I thought he was a good solid college quarterback, especially in Ames. But I never saw him as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And look, and I know this is a great system with Kyle Shanahan, one of the best play callers on the planet. He's got a lot of weapons there, and he's got an incredible defense. You think this thing ultimately works out? You think Brock Purdy can make a deep run into the playoffs?
Boy, if he does, I think, Kyle Shanahan is some sort of wizard. We've seen this before. I don't want to minimize what he was able to accomplish yesterday, and it's certainly a great story. But we have seen guys come out in a one-game scenario when the opposition doesn't really know what they're going to get from a game plan perspective, and we've seen guys flourish. Heck, Matt Flynn got an enormous deal at Seattle before getting beat out by Russell Wilson, largely on the back of a late season garbage start at Green Bay when I think he threw for like 400 yards against the Bears. Does that, you guys kind of remember that?
Yeah.
I remember, so like this happens before. And I think now he is challenged by what is the most challenging thing in the NFL, which is, can you do it consistently when they have a book on you, when they know what your game plan is going to be? Because Brock, like it or not, as good of a player as he was at Iowa State, he's not an above the X's and O's player, right? He's not an independent contributor from that standpoint, like some other quarterbacks are. So at some point, they're going to say, okay, this is what his limitations are, which means this is what the offense can do. This is where they're going to have to live, and this is what they're going to have to major in. And then the defenses will adjust. So the verdict is out on Brock Purdy, whether he can make a long playoff run or whether he has any sustainable, long-term role as a starting quarterback in this league. And one start just does not do it. The NFL is so much different than college football. College football is such a sprint. You rarely play teams a second time. There's a lot of turnover from year to year. So you don't get the familiarity that you do in the National Football League, whether it's in division or even throughout the league. And so it's more imperative as a player that you're able to adjust and evolve and get better in the NFL than it is in college football. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to project, in particular at that position, for guys that have success at the college level and then project them into the NFL.
He's our quarterback, Joel Klatt. Back to the college game. Auburn is moving towards Philip Montgomery as their offensive coordinator with Hugh Freeze, and Ron Roberts is the defensive coordinator. Philip Montgomery's time with Art Briles. What do you remember about Art Briles' offense? And what are some things you liked about it? Because obviously, if he's going to be the OC, Hugh Freeze has his style, but there'll be some Art Briles nuance to it. What did you remember or like about those Art Briles offenses back in the day?
All right, let me just throw out some terms. I loved the aggressiveness, the simplicity. They would attack. They were unafraid completely, those offenses. Corey Coleman and KD Cannon come to mind. It wasn't so much about the quarterback, although the quarterback needed to have good years. They ran it better than what people remember. That was more of a spread running attack than it was a passing attack, although they were able to throw the ball with great efficiency, in particular down the field, very similar to Tennessee. Tennessee's running this offense, right? So if you're wondering, if you're an Auburn fan, it's like, what is this offense going to look like? Just go watch a bunch of the Tennessee games from this last year. It is a half-field vertical passing game predicated on post-snap reads by the wide receiver. It's been well chronicled. I'm sure you guys have read some of those articles and watched some of those breakdowns of what Tennessee was doing with Jalen Hyatt and Hendon Hooker. A lot of people did a really good job, but it really is a simple offense. One of the things that they predicate their offense on is that they only want their wide receivers to be running 100% effort when they're getting the ball. Only team that I've ever heard say that. Normally it's like, hey, any five can get the ball, read it out, put pressure on the defense. What you see from that Baylor offense, and this is, I think, one of the beauties of this offense being forged and born at the high school level, when you have no numbers, one kid that can really do it, two kids that can really do it, and you're like, well, we can't have them running all over and getting tired. And so what they did is they built an offense that everybody knew who you were attacking before the snap. And then based on that, the opposite wide receivers would just kind of like jog off the line of scrimmage and like run a nondescript slant. It holds the defender, but they're not giving any effort. So I remember that vividly, and talking with Art Briles and Philip Montgomery, by the way, specifically about that. And it blew my mind because I came from the West Coast system that was like, urgency, timing, spacing, let's go, anybody can get the ball. And this one was very, very much the opposite of that. It had a lot of success at Baylor. It obviously had a lot of success at Tennessee. I think the one thing that I've always questioned about that system is when you get a team that can rush the passer, in particular in the middle, which is what Georgia was able to do, is push the pocket in the middle. It becomes very difficult on the quarterback to make those post-snap downfield reads on what the wide receiver is reading. And that would be the one thing that, like, Auburn better have a very good interior of that offensive line.
Joel Klatt is with us, Fox Sports. He is presented each week on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you go to MyBookie.ag and get that bonus in your account you can use right away. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. I think some people, not that Philip Montgomery's not potentially a very good hire for Auburn. You don't know that, but I think a lot of people thought Auburn maybe go with the up-and-coming offensive coordinator. Alabama may have that opening if Bill O'Brien goes back to the NFL. So I ask you, if you're a coach right now, you're a successful head coach, Klatt, you've got an OC opening, give me a name, up-and-coming offensive coordinator that it would excite a fan base. And if your name is Garrett Riley, give me two, because everybody says Garrett Riley.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I know that that's an obvious one, but that's clearly the guy. Forgive me for not knowing his name. I'm going to blank his name. Gosh dang it. He's not even calling plays right now, but I know that they really like the tight ends coach at Alabama. Do you guys know? I'm blanking his name. He came from Colorado State. He had some time at Colorado State. He's the tight ends coach at Bama.
I can't say his last name. No, Joe Cox is the tight ends coach.
That's it.
Yeah, Joe Cox.
It.
Okay, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
He's a name that a lot of us in the industry are waiting for. He's going to get a chance somewhere. It might be at Alabama, by the way, depending on what happens with Bill O'Brien. I think that's an interesting one. And then there's another guy that I think is an excellent coach, but it's not going to fit at Auburn, and it certainly wouldn't fit with Hugh Freeze, and that's Sharon Moore at Michigan. Sharon Moore is the offensive line coach and coordinator. This was his first year calling the plays. And they did it in tandem with Matt Weiss, their quarterback coach, but it was really a little bit more Sharon. Sharon cut his teeth under some West Coast guys, and he's a West Coast disciple, some guys that I actually am very familiar with. And then he's probably right now the best young offensive line coach in America. And obviously what he's done at Michigan is pretty sensational. Brian Hartline's going to be an outstanding offensive coordinator, and he's going to get a chance. I would be shocked, actually, if Ryan Day doesn't keep him at Ohio State and let him call the plays moving forward. That's something just like a little inside baseball. I would expect Ryan Day to give up play calling duties at some time soon.
Wow.
In order to give maybe a Brian Hartline a chance and to get more of an overarching view of his program. So those are some names that I would throw out there. I wish I would have known that question before. I would have dug around a little bit, but that's a good question.
My apologies.
That goes against the DNA of our show, is planning out anything. That takes away the nuance of what we do.
I'm just
there you go. By the way, last night I was with Will Anderson. I was hosting the Lott Impact Awards. He won the Lott Award as most outstanding defensive player out here in Newport Beach. I cannot talk more glowingly about Will Anderson. And I know you guys know this, I'm sure, and the fans know it, but a lot of times we just put these guys and they just become gladiators behind their helmet and behind their mask. This young man is one of the most engaging and best young men I've ever been around. He's an unbelievable player, deserves all the awards that he's getting. And I had just a great time with he and his family and all the other finalists, but he was able to take that award home last night.
So finally for me, Klatt, we were talking coordinators, a former offensive coordinator at Washington, Jaxon Smith, he gets this contract extension. I think he's one of the best coaches in all of football. He's only 43 years old. And I was telling these guys earlier, from 7-6 last year to 9-3 at Oregon State. I mean, that is tremendous growth. I've got a feeling the guy's never going to leave.
Well, he played there, and I think he's got a sense of loyalty up there. And he also is unique in the sense that he knows what he wants. A lot of guys just chase it and they never define like what they want, where they want it. Jonathan is more that type of guy. He's more in that David Shaw mold. Remember when Shaw had opportunity after opportunity to go to the NFL and he always just stayed, and it was because he was comfortable with where he was at. Chris Peterson, remember, he's got a lot of that Peterson kind of discipleship in his background. Peterson was a guy that created a great spot for himself and stayed there until the one place that he would go opened up, and then he went there. So I don't know if Jaxon Smith will never move, but it's going to take something really big. And remember, fit is really big in college football. There's only one guy out there, maybe two. Let's call it two. Maybe three. There's maybe three coaches in America that are independent of fit in terms of the location and the fan base around them. And we've seen some of those growing pains with Brian Kelly, right? He's not independent of fit. He's having to, you can't go out and change your accent, right? You got to tone it down a little bit, buddy. The three guys that I think are independent of fit are Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh, and Deion Sanders. That they are kind of the sun. Everything would revolve around them in those buildings, and whatever they would do, I think people would acknowledge that you're coming in to be the fit, to be the environment. Outside of that, fit really matters. So I'm saying, let's say a big SEC job opens up and they're like, hey, we need Jaxon Smith. I don't know if he's a great fit in the SEC or even the Big Ten so he fits really well at Oregon State. It's one of the reasons why they're having so much success. And to your point, 9-3 at Oregon State is basically like 11-1 anywhere else.
Right.
I think, and based on their resources and their recruiting base and what they have, they're the third most prestigious school in their region, and that's a region that's not going to produce enough players to even make one program a dominant program. So that's a difficult job, and he's done an outstanding job.
I don't want to get you fired, so if you know the answer but don't want to tell us, you can rub your right eye. But Brett McMurphy reporting that he believes we're just days away, maybe a month away from hearing that Oklahoma and Texas will move to the SEC in 2024. Which would be on the timeline with the expanded playoffs. That's when USC and UCLA is going to the Big Ten. Do you believe all the pieces will be settled of these big power players in the Big Ten and the SEC by the time we kick off for the 2024 season?
I wish I knew, and I would tell you, by the way. If I knew definitively, I would tell you. I've always thought that was going to be the year. Okay, like it makes way too much sense. There's no reason to drag it on. Even if you're Brett Yormark in the Big 12, you don't want to drag it on. What I think is going to end up happening, if I were to look at my crystal ball, I think what's going to happen is that they will leave, and then there's going to be major concessions in the buyout given to home dates where they will come back and play Big 12 teams in future years, or even that they will host Big 12 teams, and that will fall under the Big 12 television deal. Like, there's a way to make the money work, right? Like, they're going to get creative in some respect. So if I had to lay a bet, I would say that, yes, that's going to happen in 24. It makes way too much sense with where the playoffs going, where the Big 10 is going, all those different types of deals. And the money, while it is a huge barrier to entry right now for the individual school to just pay the fine, they can definitely get creative with the television contract, where games are played, who controls those games to put them on television, and what happens in those next couple of years as far as the non-conference.
All right, he never rubbed his eye there, so I trust that answer.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I would legitimately tell you if I knew that's I've heard all of those things that I just said, right? That's not just speculation. So if I were to lay a bet, that's what I think would happen.
Speaking of betting, you can bet anywhere, anytime, anything with MyBookie.ag. They don't just hand you jobs like this.
You guys aren't just handsome faces.
That's right. That's right. Far from that. MyBookie.ag, code next round. MyBookie.ag, code next round. I was going to say earlier, I like that you think I knew the question I was going to ask you before this interview started, much less give you a heads up on it. Klatt, thank you as always for the time. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday.
You got it. All right, boys. Have a good one.
Take care. Joel Klatt with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. MyBookie.ag, code next round.